Good afternoon, gardeners. It's Saturday, July 10th, and today I'm going to show you all how to grow tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, and other vining crops to an unlimited height, even in high winds, and it doesn't take any big long stakes. It doesn't take any heavy metal trellises. It couldn't be any easier. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. For those of you who have been following my channel for a while, you know that I love growing my tomatoes, cucumbers, some smaller melons, and other vining crops using the string trellis method that you see right behind me. In fact, I love this method so much that I designed my entire garden with a trellis that moves around the entire perimeter of the garden simply to string trellis everything. That's how big of a fan that I am of this method. And the string trellising method couldn't be any easier, and it couldn't be any cheaper. All you need are these double tomato hooks that you see up here and some tomato clips to clip the twine onto the tomato stems. And I'll make sure that I link to a video above that shows you how I built the trellis and how you simply use these clips and the double tomato hooks in order to grow your tomatoes. And if you need any of these items, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. They're very cheap, they're very affordable, they're very easy to use. Now, I've been using this method for a few years now and I absolutely love it. However, over the years, I've had some questions asked by my viewers because there are some doubts about this method, and rightfully so. The first doubt is my claim that you can trellis the vines to an unlimited height using this method. So later in this video, I'm explicitly going to explore this, and I'm going to show you exactly how and why you can trellis your tomato vines, your cucumber vines, your melon vines, whatever the vines are. This trellising method is not limited in height like staking is, like using a cattle panel trellis is, or a welded wire trellis, or any other fixed trellis. And the other claim that I make is that these trellises, these little tiny strings right here, can stand up to very high winds. How on earth can these possibly stand up to high winds? And well, it's very simple. It's because these aren't a fixed trellis. If this were a tomato stake, or if this were a welded wire trellis or some kind of metal cage of some sort, if there were high winds, your tomatoes would be pushed up against this stake and take the full front of the high winds. But because these strings bend, they actually wave with the motions of the wind. Just like skyscrapers are actually designed to sway a little bit, because that swaying motion actually alleviates the pressure of the wind. So believe it or not, because these are not completely fixed and they bend and sway with the frequency of the wind, that alleviates so much pressure that these can stand up to much higher winds than a traditional trellis. And I'm going to prove that to you. Just a couple of days ago, we had Tropical Storm Elsa blow through this area, and we took 50-mile-an-hour gusts, probably higher. And I went outside and I made sure to film this because I wanted to show you the trellises in action with the cucumbers, with the tomatoes, and show you the swaying. So I'm going to overlay that video right here, and you can see just how well these trellises stand up to high winds. Because the corn is fixed to the ground, it's taking quite a bit of damage. But because the tomatoes and the melons are swaying in the winds, they're actually not taking the full force of the wind. So hopefully after witnessing this video, you now feel comfortable that these string trellises can stand up to high winds. However, there is a big difference between tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds. Sure, maybe this setup can stand up to 50-mile-an-hour winds from a tropical storm, but what happens if a Category 2 hurricane blows in at 115 miles an hour or something? If something like that were to happen, nothing in the garden would survive. Everything would get shredded no matter how well it's staked. except for these string trellised vines. There's a very simple way that you can protect your garden against literally any kind of storm force, and that's because you can set these vines down on the ground. And I'm going to use this cucumber as an example. All I have to do is pull up these double tomato hooks and then lay the vines on the ground. And I've done this in a hurricane before. Back in both Hurricane Dorian and Hurricane Isaias, I simply laid my vegetables on the ground. I threw a tarp over them. I put a couple bricks on there. The hurricane came in. The things standing up in the garden took damage, but the items that were laid down and protected did not take any damage. Then, after the hurricane passes, all you have to do is pick your vines back up and they're back up in the air. In fact, I've even used this method to extend my growing season. When I know my first frost is coming in, I'll simply unhook my tomatoes and I'll lie them on the ground and throw a tarp over them. And if my tomato plants are still in good shape, I can extend my growing season for weeks doing this. You can't do that with other growing methods where they're permanently staked or suspended in the air. So I just wanted to illustrate how strong and versatile this method is. Because of its versatility and its fluidity, this will withstand more difficult conditions than any other method of securing your tomatoes or your cucumbers or melons that there is. Now that I've illustrated how strong this method is, now I want to show you exactly how you can trellis your vines to an unlimited height using this method. Now, before I begin, you'll notice that most of my tomatoes are starting to become pretty diseased. And that's because the disease pressure is incredibly high here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Our dew points for the past week, especially since this tropical storm came in, has been about 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything's getting really beat up. And these plants have actually been planted since about March 20th. So if you live in a place like New York City, or if you're in South Jersey, where I was born and raised, these are about what your plants would look like in the middle of September, except even worse because the dew points here are far higher. So they've been in the ground for quite a while. However, because these are cherry tomatoes, they will take the disease no problem, and they will keep producing. My cherry tomatoes are loaded with flowers. They're still setting fruit in these horrible conditions, and they've also exceeded the height of my trellis. And this is about 7.5 feet tall. So they still have a lot of life left in them, and I need to show you how you can trellis these to an unlimited height, because these will in all likelihood produce until November for me, and they have a long way to go. Now here's a close-up shot. You can see how my cherry tomatoes have exceeded the height of my trellis. So what I need to do is I simply need to drop down the string that is in this spool. And there's about 33 feet of string on this spool. So altogether with this string and the string already run, I have about 40 feet of twine on this double tomato hook right here. Now, I'm saying you can trellis to an unlimited height, but in reality, you can trellis up to the amount of twine spooled on here. So for me, that's about 40 feet. If you want, you can replace this with 100 feet of twine, and you can trellis to 100 feet. So let that be your guide. So all I have to do is simply unwrap this, bring this twine down, and then simply unwrap a little bit more twine. And now that will wind up giving me even more room to trellis right here. I could unwrap this again. Each time you unwrap this, you give about 6 inches. So I can unwrap it, and now it gives me this much more additional twine. Or I can unwrap it again. Let's unwrap another full foot. Now the top of my tomato plant is all the way down here. So you can really only do about 6 to 12 inches at once, otherwise you'll create too much slack. So this right here will give me about another foot of height right here. Now that I showed you the close-up on how to unravel the spooled double tomato hooks, I want to show you how to control the entire plant. Right now I only dropped half the plant, so it's kind of out of sync. You have to do that to both of the double tomato hooks at the same amount. So I have to also give 12 inches of slack right here so the plants stay symmetrically balanced. And then that will continue to lower the plants to the ground. I can actually drop them even more. You kind of have to find where the plant is most comfortable when you do this, because you still need a little bit of tension in the lines. But if you recall, both of these vines were growing pretty much to the top of this cable right now. Now there's probably about a solid 12 to 18 inches of play that I have that I didn't have before. Now I just need to take the double tomato hooks and secure the vines in their new positions. Now in greenhouse conditions where things are climate controlled and they never get overhead rain, tomatoes can live for literally years, and they can grow to be 15, 20 or more feet long. And in those cases, these vines can get so long that they sometimes have to be coiled and spooled on the ground. So realistically, as an outdoor gardener on the southeastern coast, my tomatoes, no matter what I do, will never live that long. But if you do have a really generous climate that you don't see a lot of tomato pests and diseases, and you can grow tomatoes for longer than a year, it is possible to remove these clips. And what you can do is you can lower your strings all the way to the ground to drop as much tension as possible. And then once the entire plant hits the ground, start removing some of the lower clips. And then you just rewrap the twine up top to pull it up a little bit to reestablish tension in the line. And you can kind of coil these vines on the ground over time. And when you do that, you'll want to remove any of the leaves or the old stems that may be on there, just to have as little contact with the ground as possible, because that's generally where tomatoes get diseases. So over time you can actually wind up with like a rolled up extension cord of tomato vines on the ground. It's pretty neat. It's not something that will ever happen to me in my climate or for pretty much anybody on the East Coast because of our outdoor conditions, but the possibility is there, especially if you're in a controlled greenhouse environment. So that's today's video, everybody. I know I've made a few videos on the string trellising method, but I really wanted to do this as a follow-up for everybody that asks questions about the wind resistance and asks questions about what can you do once the tomato plants or your cucumbers or other vines exceed the height of your infrastructure. So I really hope that helped clarify things and clear things up. This is, I believe, the best method of growing vines vertically. I really think it's a revolutionary game changer, and it can really add value to your garden if you have the ability to make some kind of overhead steel cable trellis or other trellis overhead that you can attach the double tomato hooks to. So everybody, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to hit the like button. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products I featured in this video, like the tomato clips and the double tomato hooks, as well as any of the other products that I use in my garden, they're all linked in my Amazon storefront down in the video description. If you're interested in any channel related merchandise, they are all linked in my spread shop in the video description as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Well, Dale, the harvests are really coming in, and this is my first ever cantaloupe. This is a little baby cantaloupe. Look how small they are. They're called honey rock, and it's safe for dogs to eat cantaloupe, and I know that you've never had them before. So can you sit? Let's see if you like cantaloupe, because if you like them, I'll give you a nice big bowl of it for dessert. What do you think, buddy? I'm not a big fan of cantaloupe, but that's because I don't like the ones in the stores. But how's the homegrowns? Much better, right? Oh, let's try one more. If you like this, we'll give you a bowl. Oh boy, you're gonna have a nice dessert tonight. Oh boy, Dale, this is gonna be so good. We have your cantaloupe with plain, unsweetened yogurt. Dale, can you go on your bed? Oh, there he goes. He's gonna go right on his bed, I just know it. Oh, that's a good boy, Dale. Oh, buddy, this is gonna be so good. Can I have a shake? Oh, thank you, Dale. Thank you. Okay, down. Very good, buddy. Oh, you're gonna love that. That looks so good. That looks so good, buddy.